She stood there, trembling by the barn door, tears glistening in the lamplight as laughter echoed behind her. Cruel, sharp, unforgettable. "You're too heavy to dance with," one boy had jeered. But what happened next, when a lone cowboy pushed back his chair and walked out into the moonlight after her, would change not just her night, but the entire course of her life. The oil lamps cast a warm, golden glow across the weathered planks of Henderson's barn, transforming the rough-hewn space into something almost magical. Fiddle music spilled out into the cool Wyoming evening, accompanied by the stomp of boots and the occasional whoop of joy. Saturday night barn dances were the highlight of Copper Creek's social calendar, and tonight's gathering had drawn folks from ranches 30 miles out. Sarah Mitchell stood at the edge of the dance floor, her calloused hands smoothing down the fabric of her best dress, a simple blue cotton affair she'd sewn herself from fabric she'd saved 3 months to buy. Her dark hair was pinned up as neatly as she could manage, without a proper mirror, and she'd even dabbed a bit of her mother's rosewater behind her ears. She'd been working up her courage for the better part of an hour. Across the barn, Jacob Thornton laughed with his friends, his blonde hair catching the lamplight. He was the youngest son of the Thornton Ranch, one of the most prosperous spreads in the territory. Sarah had admired him from afar for 2 years now, ever since he'd helped her father fix a broken wagon wheel on the road to town. He'd been kind that day, smiling at her with those blue eyes that seemed to hold the whole Wyoming sky. Tonight, she'd decided, she would ask him to dance. Her friend Emma squeezed her arm. "Go on, Sarah, you look lovely." Sarah took a deep breath and began to make her way around the edge of the dance floor. Her heart hammered against her ribs, and she could feel the heat rising in her cheeks. She was acutely aware of her body, the way her dress pulled tight across her middle, the heaviness of her hips and thighs, the roundness of her arms. She'd always been what folks politely called sturdy, built for hard work rather than the willowy elegance that seemed to be favored in the ladies' magazines that occasionally made their way to Copper Creek. But her mother had told her that beauty came in all forms, and that a good man would see the beauty of a kind heart and a strong spirit. Sarah held on to that thought as she approached Jacob's group. "Excuse me," she said softly, then louder when the music momentarily swelled. "Jacob?" He turned, and for a moment his smile remained in place. Then his gaze traveled over her, and something shifted in his expression, something that made Sarah's stomach twist into a painful knot. "Oh, Sarah," he said, not unkindly, but with a tone that already held rejection. "How are you?" "I'm well, thank you." "I was wondering..." She had to push the words out past the sudden tightness in her throat. "Would you like to dance?" The silence that fell over Jacob's group seemed to stretch on forever, though it could only have been seconds. Behind Jacob, his friend Thomas smirked, elbowing another boy whose name Sarah didn't know. Jacob's cheeks flushed red. Sarah, that's real nice of you to ask, but I'm feeling a bit tired right now." "Maybe later?" It was a polite refusal, but before Sarah could retreat with whatever dignity she could salvage, Thomas spoke up, his voice loud enough to carry over the music. "Come on, Jake, tell her the truth. You don't want to dance because you're afraid she'll crush your feet." He laughed, a harsh braying sound. "Well, she might crush the whole dance floor." The laughter that followed felt like a physical blow. Sarah's vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. She could see Jacob looking uncomfortable, but not correcting his friend. Could see other people turning to look, their faces ranging from pity to amusement to disgust. "Must eat like a horse," another voice muttered, not quite low enough. "Probably why old Mitchell can barely keep his ranch going, feeds it all to his daughter." Sarah turned and fled, not caring that her sudden departure would only add to the gossip. She pushed past the refreshment tables, past Emma, who called out her name in concern, past Mrs. Henderson, who tried to stop her with a kind hand. She burst out of the barn into the cool night air, gasping as if she'd been underwater. The tears came then, hot and angry, streaming down her face. She stumbled away from the barn's bright doorway, into the shadows where the wagons were parked. She leaned against a rough wooden fence rail, her whole body shaking with the force of her sobs. Stupid, she thought viciously. Stupid to think someone like Jacob would want to dance with someone like her. Stupid to put on her best dress and prettiest smile and think it would matter. Stupid to believe her mother's gentle lies about inner beauty mattering more than the size of her waist. She'd seen how the other girls looked at the dances, girls like Catherine Pierce with her tiny waist and delicate features, or Mary Lou Sykes, who moved like a willow in the wind. Those were the girls who had their pick of partners, who never had to ask, but were always asked. Those were the girls who would marry well and have pretty children, and never know the shame of being laughed at for daring. To want something as simple as a dance. "I'm going home," she whispered to the night air, to the distant stars, to no one at all. "I'm never coming back." She was wiping her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to compose herself enough to find her father and tell him she needed to leave, when she heard footsteps approaching through the grass. "Miss?" The voice was deep and unfamiliar. Sarah's back stiffened and she quickly turned away, not wanting anyone to see her tear-stained face. "I'm fine," she said, her voice thick. "Please just go back to the dance." "Can't do that, I'm afraid." Despite herself, Sarah turned slightly. The man stood a respectful distance away, his figure backlit by the glow from the barn. He was tall, very tall, with broad shoulders and long legs. He wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy, worn denim pants, a simple cotton shirt, and a dark vest. His hat was pushed back slightly, revealing dark hair, but what caught her attention was that he wasn't looking at her with pity or amusement. He was looking at her with something that seemed almost like anger, but not directed at her. "I heard what those boys said in there," he continued, his voice low and controlled. "Heard them laugh. Made me sick to my stomach." Sarah felt a fresh wave of humiliation wash over her. "Then you came out here to pity me?" "I don't need your charity." "Pity?" The cowboy shook his head. "No, ma'am. I came out here because I've been sitting at that table near the door for the last hour, watching you work up the courage to ask that boy to dance. And I thought you were about the bravest person in that whole barn." Sarah blinked, uncertain she'd heard him correctly. "Brave." He took a step closer, and in the dim light spilling from the barn, she could see his face more clearly. He was perhaps 30, with strong, weathered features and dark eyes that held a kindness she hadn't expected. A scar ran along his jawline, thin and white. "Takes courage to put yourself out there like that," he said simply. "Takes courage to risk rejection, to be vulnerable. Those boys in there, they're cowards. Takes no courage at all to tear someone down, to mock someone for wanting simple human connection." "I shouldn't have asked," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I should have known better." "Known what better?" The cowboy's voice took on an edge. "Known that you shouldn't want to dance, that you shouldn't want to be treated with basic human decency. Known that someone like him wouldn't want to dance with someone like me. Then he's a damn fool." The words were said with such conviction that Sarah found herself looking up at this stranger fully for the first time. His eyes met hers, and she saw no mockery there, no pity, just a fierce, honest certainty. "You don't know me," she said. "I know you sewed that dress yourself, saw you checking the stitching earlier. Know you've been working hard, judging by the calluses on your hands when you smoothed your skirt. Know you came here hoping for a good time, maybe a dance or two, just like everybody else. Know you didn't deserve what happened in there." He paused. "And I know that Fiddle's playing a waltz right now, and you still haven't had your dance." Sarah's breath caught. "What?" The cowboy held out his hand. "Dance with me. Out here." She looked around at the darkness, the parked wagons, the distant sounds of the party inside. Why not? Music's just as good out here, and the company's a damn sight better. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Plus, the dance floor's a lot less crowded. I don't even know your name." "James Cordell. Friends call me Cord. I work the Triple Bar Ranch about 20 miles north of here." He kept his hand extended. "And you're Sarah Mitchell from the Mitchell Spread east of town. Your father buys his seed from the same supplier as my boss. You know who I am. Seen you in town a few times. You're the one who always tips her hat to old Pete, the beggar who sits outside the general store. Not many folks acknowledge Pete. Says a lot about a person's character. Sarah didn't know what to say to that. This strange cowboy had noticed her, not just tonight, but before. Had seen her acts of simple kindness and remembered them. "I'm not very good at dancing," she admitted, looking at his outstretched hand. "That makes two of us. Come on, Miss Sarah. Let's be not very good at it together." There was something in his voice, a gentleness mixed with a certainty, that made Sarah reach out and place her hand in his. His palm was warm and calloused, the hand of a man who worked hard for his living. He led her a few steps away from the wagons to a small clearing where the grass was smooth. Inside the barn, the fiddle sang out a waltz, and Cord placed his other hand respectfully on her waist. Sarah's hand came up to rest on his shoulder, and they began to move. He hadn't lied about not being very good. His steps were a bit clumsy, and he stepped on her toe once, apologizing with such chagrin that Sarah found herself laughing, a real laugh that pushed away some of the evening's pain. "I spent most of my life on horseback," he explained, guiding her through a turn. "Horses don't require much in the way of fancy footwork." "It's perfect," Sarah said, and meant it. Under the Wyoming stars, with the music drifting out on the cool night air, and this kind stranger holding her as if she were something precious, she felt the knots in her chest begin to loosen. "Those people in there," Cord said after a moment, "they don't know what they're missing. The prettiest girl at the whole dance is out here with me." "You don't have to say things like that." "I don't say things I don't mean." Sarah looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of mockery or lies. She found none. "Why are you being so kind to me?" "You don't know me. Maybe I'd like to." The waltz ended and another began, but neither of them stopped moving. "Truth is, I've had my eye on you for a while now. Saw you in town a few months back helping Mrs. Chen carry her groceries when her wagon broke. Saw you stand up to those boys who were tormenting the stray dogs behind the saloon. Saw you work your father's market stall all day in the hot sun, never complaining, always smiling at customers. You saw all that. Like I said, I've been noticing you. Then why didn't you ever speak to me?" Gord's expression turned sheepish. "Same reason you had to work up courage to talk to that boy, I expect. Fear of rejection? I'm just a ranch hand, Miss Sarah. Don't have much to my name except a good horse and honest work. Figured a woman like you would want someone with better prospects. A woman like me. Smart, kind, hardworking. The kind of woman who'd be a true partner, not just a pretty face to show off." Sarah's eyes stung with fresh tears, but these were different from the ones she'd shed earlier. "No one's ever spoken to me like that before. Then folks around here are blind." Cord slowed their dance as another song ended. He looked down at her seriously. "Miss Sarah, I know tonight started poorly for you, but I'm hoping maybe it could end better. Would you let me court you? Properly, I mean. Let me take you to church socials, bring you flowers, show you that not all men are fools like those boys in there." Sarah's heart raced. She thought about the humiliation she'd felt, the laughter still ringing in her ears. She thought about how easy it would be to say no, to protect herself from the possibility of more pain. But she also thought about how it felt to dance under the stars with someone who saw her, really saw her, and found her worthy. "Yes," she whispered. "I'd like that very much." The next 3 months passed like a dream Sarah was afraid to wake from. True to his word, Cord appeared at her father's ranch the very next Sunday, riding up just as the Mitchell family was preparing to leave for church. He was cleaned up, wearing what were clearly his best clothes, his dark hair slicked back and his boots polished to a shine. "Mr. Mitchell," he'd said, tipping his hat respectfully, "I'd like your permission to escort your daughter to church this morning, and to court her properly if she's willing and you're agreeable." Sarah's father, a weathered man of 50 with kind eyes, had looked between Cord and his daughter, seeing the hope written plainly on Sarah's face. "You work the Triple Bar?" "Yes, sir. 5 years now. I'm foreman there, responsible for the herd and the hands. Honest work, honest pay. Heard good things about you from Tom Bradley." Her father had extended his hand. "You're welcome to court my daughter, Mr. Cordell, but you treat her right, you hear? Wouldn't dream of doing otherwise, sir. That first Sunday, Cord had helped Sarah up into his wagon with such careful courtesy that she'd felt like a queen. They'd ridden to church side by side, and when they entered together, Sarah had felt the eyes of the congregation on them, including Jacob Thornton's surprised stare, but Cord had simply guided her to a pew with his hand at the small of her back, proprietary and proud, as if escorting her was the greatest privilege of his life. The Sundays that followed fell into a pattern. Cord would arrive early, would sit with the Mitchells during service, and afterward would ask Sarah's father permission to take her for a ride. They'd drive out to the creek or up to the bluffs overlooking the valley, and they'd talk. Sarah learned that Cord was from Texas originally, that he'd lost his parents to fever when he was 16, that he'd worked his way up from a simple ranch hand to foreman through hard work and dedication. He wanted to save enough to buy his own land someday, modest though it might be. He loved horses and the wide open spaces, the challenge of working with cattle, the satisfaction of a hard day's work. In turn, Sarah told him about her dreams of expanding her father's ranch, her love of reading though books were scarce, her talent for sewing and cooking. She told him about her mother's illness the previous year, how Sarah had nursed her back to health, about the loneliness of being an only child on an isolated ranch. They talked about everything and nothing, and Sarah found herself more comfortable with Cord than she'd ever been with anyone except her parents. But it wasn't just talk. Cord brought her wildflowers he'd picked on his rides. He helped her father repair a section of fence that had been troubling them for weeks. He showed her how to whistle for horses and taught her constellations in the night sky. He made her laugh with stories of his misadventures as a young cowboy, and he never, not once, made her feel anything but beautiful. The first time he kissed her was 6 weeks into their courtship. They'd been sitting by Copper Creek, their boots off and feet dangling in the cool water, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I'm falling in love with you, Sarah," he'd said quietly. "Want you to know that before I do this." "Do what?" she'd asked, though her heart already knew. He'd cupped her face in his hands, those calloused palms gentle against her cheeks, and kissed her with such tenderness that she'd felt tears spring to her eyes. It was her first kiss, and it was perfect, sweet and soft and full of promise. "I love you too," she'd whispered when they parted. But their happiness wasn't without its challenges. The gossips in Copper Creek had plenty to say about the relationship. Sarah heard the whispers at church socials, saw the raised eyebrows at the general store. "Can't believe he's courting her," she'd overheard Mrs. Patterson tell Mrs. Henderson. "A strong, handsome man like that could have his pick of girls. What's he thinking?" "Maybe he feels sorry for her," Mrs. Henderson had replied. "Or maybe he's got strange tastes." Sarah had learned to hold her head high and ignore them, but the words still stung. Worse were the encounters with Jacob Thornton, who'd begun watching her and Cord with what seemed like confusion and resentment. Once he'd even approached her in town when Cord was loading supplies. "Sarah," he'd said, blocking her path, "I wanted to apologize for what happened at the dance. Thomas was drunk and out of line, and I should have said something." "Thank you for the apology," Sarah had replied coolly. "But it's several months too late. I also wanted to ask if maybe you'd like to take a ride with me sometime. Get to know each other better." Sarah had stared at him in disbelief. "Are you serious? You rejected me, let your friends mock me, and now that you see me with someone else, you're interested." "I made a mistake." "No, Jacob, you showed me exactly who you are, and I'm grateful for it, because it led me to someone who sees my worth." She'd stepped around him. "I'm with Cord now, and I've never been happier." She'd walked away without looking back, feeling stronger than she'd ever felt before. 3 months after that first dance under the stars, Cord asked Sarah to meet him at their spot by Copper Creek on a Saturday evening. It was early autumn now, the air crisp with the promise of coming winter, the aspens turning gold on the hillsides. Sarah arrived to find a blanket spread on the grass, a small basket of food, and Cord standing nervously by the creek's edge. He turned when he heard her approach, and the look on his face made her heart skip. "You look worried," she said, coming to stand beside him. Is everything all right? Better than all right. I hope. He took both her hands in his. Sarah, these past 3 months have been the best of my life. Every day I spend with you, I fall more in love with you. You're the strongest, kindest, most beautiful woman I've ever known. Cord, let me finish. He smiled, but she could see his hands trembling slightly. I know I'm not much, just a foreman with some savings and a lot of dreams. But I love you with everything I am, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that to you every single day. He released one of her hands to reach into his vest pocket, pulling out a small cloth bundle. When he unwrapped it, Sarah gasped. It was a ring, simple but beautiful, with a small sapphire set in a gold band. It was my mother's, Cord said softly. The only thing of value I have from her. Sarah Mitchell, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Sarah's vision blurred with tears, happy tears this time, joyful tears. Yes, she breathed. Yes, Cord. 1,000 times yes. He slipped the ring on her finger and it fit perfectly, the blue stone catching the evening light. Then he swept her up in his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing like children, and when he set her down, he kissed her with all the passion and promise of their future together. They sat on the blanket and talked long into the evening about their plans. Cord had been saving diligently and had enough to buy a small piece of land adjacent to Sarah's father's ranch. They could build a house there, start their own herd, work both properties together. Your father's getting older, Cord said. It makes sense to combine our resources, work the land together. Eventually it'll all be one big ranch for our children, Sarah repeated, marveling at the words. A future she'd almost given up hoping for was suddenly real and within reach. I want at least 4, Cord said with a grin. Maybe 5. We'll see about that, Sarah laughed. Let's start with 1 and work our way up. As the stars came out above them, Sarah thought back to that night at the barn dance, the humiliation, the tears, the certainty that she would never be wanted. And then she thought of Cord walking over, seeing her worth when no one else did, loving her not in spite of who she was, but because of it. What are you thinking about? Cord asked, holding her close. About how that awful night led me to you, Sarah said. About how sometimes the worst moments can lead to the best things. I think about that night too, Cord admitted. I think about how close I came to not going to that dance at all. My boss practically had to drag me there. Said I worked too much and needed to socialize. Thank God he did. Thank God you were brave enough to walk up to that boy and ask him to dance. If you hadn't, I might never have had the courage to talk to you. Sarah turned in his arms to face him. You gave me something that night, Cord. You gave me back my dignity, my sense of worth. You made me believe I deserved to be loved. You always deserved it, Sarah. You always did. He kissed her forehead gently. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never forget it. 1 year later, the barn raising was in full swing, the sound of hammers and saws filling the warm summer air. Half the county had turned out to help Cord and Sarah build their new barn on the land they'd purchased together. It was tradition in Copper Creek. When someone needed help, the community came together. Sarah stood near the refreshment tables, one hand resting on her swollen belly, 6 months along with their first child, directing the women who'd brought food to share. Her mother was beside her, recovered now and healthy, chattering excitedly about becoming a grandmother. Sarah, Emma called, waving from across the worksite. Come see what they've done with the loft. Sarah made her way carefully across the construction site, accepting helping hands and warm congratulations as she went. The barn was taking beautiful shape, larger than she dared hope, with good strong bones that would stand for generations. Cord appeared at her elbow, sweaty from work, but grinning. Taking a break? He asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. Just checking on things. You've all done amazing work. Well, we're motivated. Boss man promised the best barbecue in the territory once we're done, and nobody wants to disappoint a pregnant woman. Sarah laughed, leaning into him. Around them, the community worked together. Her father alongside Cord's boss, neighbors who'd become friends. Even some of the people who'd gossiped about their relationship at first, but had come around when they saw how happy Sarah and Cord were together. Jacob Thornton was there too, working in respectful silence. He'd apologized properly a few months back, and while things would never be comfortable between them, Sarah had forgiven him. People could change, could grow. She was proof of that. The girl who'd once believed she wasn't worthy of love had become a woman secure in her worth, confident in her place in the world. As the afternoon wore on and the barn's structure became more solid, Sarah found herself thinking about that barn dance a year ago. If someone had told her then that 12 months later she'd be married to a wonderful man, pregnant with their first child, building a life and a ranch together, she never would have believed it. But here she was, surrounded by love and community, her hand in Cord's, their future stretching bright and promising before them. That night, after everyone had gone home and they lay together in their small house, Cord's hand resting gently on her belly, Sarah said, "I never thanked you properly. You know, for what? For that night. For walking over when no one else would. For seeing me." Cord turned to face her in the darkness. "Sarah, I was the lucky one. You could have said no when I asked you to dance. Could have told me to go away and leave you alone. But you were brave enough to take a chance on a stranger. Brave enough to trust again after being hurt. That's what I'll always love about you. Your courage, your strength, your huge heart. I love you," Sarah whispered. "I love you too. And our baby. And the life we're building together." He kissed her softly. "Thank you for dancing with me that night. Thank you for asking." Outside, the Wyoming wind whispered through the grass, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote sang to the moon. In their small house, safe and loved, Sarah drifted off to sleep, dreaming of the future, of children playing in that new barn, of growing old with Cord beside her, of a life built not on what others thought she deserved, but on what she'd had the courage to reach for and the strength to hold on to. And it all began with a dance under the stars, with a cowboy who saw her worth when no one else did and had the courage to tell her so.